All right. I think we have a good amount of people in the room, so we're going to start because it is 5 after. I just want to thank everyone for joining us. If you are here to learn about building habitat in your backyard, you're in the right place. I am Joanna Demas with the Lake Michigan Bird Observatory, and I'll be quickly sharing just a little brief information about the Lake Michigan Bird Observatory and why we're excited to bring this webinar to you all. And then we'll have our presenters from LandCo take the screen. Next slide. So at the Lake Michigan Bird Observatory, we are headquartered in Port Washington, but we do have 3 pillar programs that work from the neighborhood scale to the statewide level. And we work to advance bird conservation through research, monitoring, and education. And we do that with our 3 pillar programs. Next slide. And one of those 3 pillar programs is our Neighborhood Habitat Improvement Program. NHIP obviously works at the neighborhood level to improve urban habitats in residential yards. And we do this by identifying and breaking down barriers to prevent folks from adopting the 7 simple actions, because we've lost nearly 3 billion birds since 1970. Of those 7 simple actions, NHIP focuses heavily on reducing chemicals, planting native plants, and participating in community science. Next slide. And we achieve our goals by having several community science projects that we can always use more help with. And we have nest box monitoring to vegetation monitoring and tree surveys to even help with our native plant cell, and a new partnership pilot with the Urban Ecology Center and the Wisconsin Humane Society to monitor bird collisions. Next slide. And if volunteering isn't your jam, we have several community events from tree giveaways across southeastern Wisconsin and beyond to our native plant sale and World Migratory Bird Day celebration, and even an interactive workshop where you can meet one-on-one with designers to sketch your own backyard habitat layout. Next slide. And we're excited to offer new reoccurring event series this year with bird walks at Afterglow Farm, our new home base, and a nature journaling workshop series through summer. Next slide. If you didn't keep up with me on all of that other jazz, because I only briefly highlighted our work, you can follow us on social media or by going to our website and subscribing to our newsletter. Next slide. The Neighborhood Habitat Improvement Program goals are to unite neighbors through native plants and birds, but we are not the experts, so we're always relying on other community members and orgs to help us. So we're excited to bring both Christy Sherpinski and James Steiner from LandCo, who are both licensed landscape architects with a lifelong love of nature, to share more about bringing backyard habitat to you. With that, we'll stop sharing our screen, and then James and Christy, you can share yours.
Great, thank you for having us. We really appreciate the invitation. I'm just going to go ahead and share screen. Are we all good?
Yep, your screen almost looks good. You got a side panel on the left.
Yep,
there we go.
Screen, there you go.
All right, we're good?
Now it's great.
Okay, thank you, Joanna, for that introduction. As Joanna mentioned, I'm James, and I'm here with Christy, and tonight we're gonna hopefully have an interesting talk for you on designing for plant and animal diversity. At Landco, our tagline is ecology plus art equals beauty plus function. So we like that equation because we're kind of math geeks, but we also feel that it embodies our overall design goal of really combining ecologic health and aesthetics into overall design solutions. So that's one of the things that we try to infuse into every project that we do at Landco. A little bit about us. As we heard, we're professionally trained and licensed ecologists and landscape architects. We, as I mentioned before, we really have a blend of beauty and functionality in all of our designs, and every one of our projects is really one of a kind. Each site is unique, so each site requires a specific set of design challenges that we try to overcome, blending both aesthetics and ecologic health. Excuse me. Tonight, we're going to cover a few topics. We're going to start with a lot of this. Some of you know already, but some of you might find new information that you'll like to take with you. Why is ecology important? Some facts about ecology, some of the terms and definitions that we use in our profession. We're going to go over some general ways we can protect nature. Christy's going to talk a little bit about native plants, which we strongly promote, how to use plant nomenclature and then picking the right plant for the right place. I will talk a little bit about green infrastructure, which is, again, another solution that we infuse into a lot of our designs. Designing for diversity, and then we're going to go through briefly our design process here at Landco, and then a call to action that we hope will resonate with you and some ideas you can bring home. As people who love ornithology and birds, I think you would all agree that ecology is very important. And so one thing that just a couple facts, there's a 73% decline in the global population of mammals, fish, birds, and reptiles since 1970. Freshwater habitats are especially hard hit, populations having collapsed by 83%. And a lot of this, the deterioration of ecosystems has really made a significant destruction of habitat, and climate change has really affected all levels of the ecological world. Some interesting facts that about 1 million animal and plant species are now threatened, which to me is a shockingly high number, the highest number in human history. 66% of the ocean environment has been significantly altered, and 3/4 of the land-based environment has been changed. More than a third of the world's land surface and nearly 75% of freshwater resources are devoted to crop or livestock production. So all of these actions are impacting biodiversity around the world, and this affects sites from every scale, from small backyards to large acres to rural sites. So with those sobering facts in mind, we realize that it is a vanishing world. Things are being threatened, and now is the time to act. So instead of despairing, we're going to try to go forward with some exciting ways that everyone can participate and help our ecologic world. Some terms and definitions that, again, some know, but we can go through a few. Biodiversity, it's all different kinds of life that make up our world. And an ecosystem is the community of interacting organisms that all work together. A habitat patch is a specific area in the landscape that is used by species for breeding or obtaining resources. And if you string a bunch of habitat patches together, you create a corridor, which would be a narrow strip of habitat that's all strung together. Green infrastructure is something that we're going to talk about quite a bit. GI is the term that it's used in the profession, and it's an approach to water management that protects, restores, and mimics the natural water cycle, which we talked about before as being endangered. And resiliency is just the ability to bounce back from disturbances and adapt to new conditions. Out of your house, you can see some of the ways that the ecosystem is disconnected in the environment. Roads, building of highways and freeways that break through open land. Deforestation and urbanization are happening all around us in both urban, suburban, and rural areas. There is overexploitation of resources, which we know are a finite commodity. Climate change is something that most of us could have witnessed ourselves specifically. Pollution, while there's a lot of great improvements in pollution in our area, is still carbon monoxide and water pollution are something that's still a serious problem to be addressed. The idea of monocultures, and by that we really, when you just have one thing, one species, if something happens to that species, the whole chunk of the system goes down. So trying to avoid monocultures. Land use change, we're seeing that all around us in the greater Milwaukee and southern Wisconsin region. And then we'll talk a little bit about invasive species too, how they are an additional threat. A positive spin on this is that through creative design solutions, we can restore and repair some of the damage that has been done. So we talked about the disconnects with roads and highways, but this is a fun project, the Hypar Wildlife Bridge, which has been built in Colorado by a landscape architecture firm, Michael van Valkenburg. And using the rejuvenating power of landscapes, this shows how it can literally span a disconnect and make it a connect, where this land bridge really allows for all species to cross the busy freeway, and it reconnects a disturbed corridor. There are 4 basic ways to protect ecosystems, and so I'll just go through those briefly. Provisioning systems are products that are obtained from ecosystems. This would be freshwater supply, food production, oceans, and marine life. And then there are regulating services that are the benefits obtained from that regulation. So climate, water, and pest regulation. Cultural services are experiences that we get from ecosystems, which would include recreation, tourism, education, and aesthetics, which are very important, but not necessarily measurable, or they're more felt. And then the supporting services necessary for the production of all other ecosystem services, which would be soil health, fertility, biodiversity, and sustainable land practices. Ways that we can increase diversity: if we can protect it to save it, we can restore it if it's been damaged. We can also mimic ways, try to recreate ways where it was healthy. Using native species is something that we do in our work all the time, and we'll talk quite a bit more on that. Layers is something that is very specific to the bird community for creating animal habitat. Diversifying, actually avoiding the monoculture idea and creating a lot of different species. Offering habitat is quite important for allowing all creatures to have a place to live and thrive. Light and noise pollution is something that affects many of us in both urban, suburban, and rural areas. Building the corridors, as we saw, ways to repair those, reducing anything that threatens the environment, and then incorporating wise management skills are all ways we can increase diversity.
So why use native plants? First of all, they're uniquely adapted to our climate. They create wildlife habitat. So if you build it, the animals will come. They support native pollinators. They can be lower maintenance.
Sure.
Not There's no such thing as a no maintenance landscape, but sometimes if they're in the right habitat conditions, that you can have a lower landscape maintenance landscape with native plants. And they add beauty, their own unique kind of beauty to the landscape. So I'm sure many of you seen this root system diagram. It's showing the native plant roots that are many, many feet long, accessing soil and water resources from deep in the soil column, versus non-natives typically have very shallow root systems and can't access deeper water sources during drought years or drought periods. And I'm sure many or all of you have heard of the rusty patch bumblebee, which is an endangered bee species that has its epicenter in Wisconsin area, I like to call it the panda bear of the insect world, because it's become quite well known and it's like the poster child of the bees. Um, Rusty patch bumblebees are generalists, so they will feed and get nectar and pollen from a variety of native plant sources. And bumblebees in general are one of the most important pollinators of everything, actually, not just crops. So people ask us, what's the key to attracting pollinators in your garden? And it's actually really very simple. If you plant a native plant that has a flower, it will attract a native pollinator. There's there's specialist pollinators that will only pollinate certain plant species, and there's generalists that'll pollinate pretty much anything. But like I said before, if you build it, they will come. And again, natives are better for wildlife. I'm sure many, again, are familiar with Doug Tallamy's book, Bringing Nature Home, where he did an experiment comparing the number of insects on native oaks versus non-native trees. And the results were amazing. He counted over 400 species of insects on one oak tree versus only 2 on the non-native tree. And if you support the insects, then the insects feed, the rest of the food chain. You feed the songbirds and the small mammals, and then the larger predators feed on the small mammals. So you're supporting every level of the food chain. So as the Azure Sea Society has said, we're experiencing an insect apocalypse. Um, but the flip side of that is because of every small landscape space can create an oasis for insects, and it will have impacts up the food chain. So which of these do you feel are more attractive to you? I think it would depend on who you ask. You know, Traditional suburban landscape is what we see most places, with the sterile lawn that's a perfect carpet with a couple of shrubs along the edge and the sides of the building. Whereas if you have native plants, you can have interesting textures and organic structures throughout your yard. The other difference too is it takes a lot of inputs of herbicides and probably pesticides too to keep this lawn looking that perfect, because nature loves diversity. So it takes a lot of effort to um, keep it not diverse like this. This is the monoculture. So the purpose of this slide is educational. It's just, there's a lot of terms flung around, and we just wanted to explain what they mean. So some of you may know, but not everybody is familiar with plant nomenclature. So plants have common names, and they also have the scientific names in Latin with genus and species. So Asclepias incarnata is the genus and species for swamp milkweed, which is the common name. Whereas, and the reason we need scientific names is, for instance, people in the South like to call a soda Coke, and up north people call soda pop, but they're both talking about the same thing. There's different common names for different species throughout, the US. So it's, if you say the scientific name, you're both talking about the same plant. Then cultivar on the other side is a name for a plant that the nurseries breed for certain characteristics. And you can create cultivars out of pretty much any plant. But the difference between cultivars and straight natives is that the nursery usually uses cuttings or the same genetic material to produce cultivars, because once they get the characteristics that they want, they just want to breed everything to be exactly the same. And when we say nativar, that's a cultivar that's been developed from one of these straight native species. So Aronia melanocarpa ground is a ground hugging plant, whereas Sambucus racemosa has this bright yellow foliage that it's been bred to have. The straight native species, though, they have the most genetic diversity within their own species because they're not bred to all have the same genetics. So these would be the healthiest for the landscape because it provides more resiliency. And also, it has all the characteristics that a pollinator might need, whereas some of these nativars or cultivars may be lacking the right flower or nectar type or pollen because they were bred for certain characteristics that excluded that, but not necessarily so. And just to a little bit more, here's just an example of New England aster is a 4-foot tall native species, and the nurseries have bred this New England aster purple dome which is 2 feet tall and it has this compact growth habit. So it's just to provide more reliable characteristics in the landscape setting. We do occasionally use them in our designs because there's certain places where you just can't have big, tall, floppy plants everywhere, but there are places where it is appropriate, especially if you're doing native restorations and the like. Here's another example of a nativar purple coneflower. Now you can get them in probably 50 or 60 different flower shapes or colors, but they're all derived from this original Echinacea purpurea purple flower. And then again, other characteristics are bred for, like Hogan Girardii, Red October is bred for its red foliage, and Summer Sun and some of these other ones are bred for more compact growing style. So the straight native Joe Pye weed grows 6 or 7 feet tall, and this one's like 3 feet tall. So it's just, it gives you some options, but like I said, the straight native is always the best if you're trying to promote for wildlife and pollinators. So Mother Nature has rules, and if you're having a problem in your landscape, you're probably breaking one of her rules, chances are, because every plant animal has a role to play in the environment, and they're going to try to fulfill that role regardless of whether it agrees with your garden plans or not. So like I said, Mother Nature loves to diversify space, and you'll find plants in every single possible place, even in the little cracks in your driveway. There's going to be some plant that wants to fill it. Plants compete with each other for space. So there's some of the larger plants that are more bullies, or that compete for light. Reproduction, there's some plants that will just have seeds everywhere, and they'll spread seeds everywhere, where there's some that just reproduce by their root systems, and they'll kind of slowly spread that way. So I say this just so we can be mindful that the different plants have different behavior styles depending on where they are in your landscape and who they're with. I like to show this. When you're choosing plants for your landscape, you need to make sure you have the right plant in the right place. So you have to study your plant, the conditions in your yard, whether it's dry versus moist, shady versus sunny, or sandy versus clay soils. Now, in this part of our state, we're mostly clay soils, unless you're right by near Lake Michigan. And there's certain plants that, like wetland plants, will only occur in wetlands because they're adapted to those conditions. So if you try to plant cardinal flower or boneset in a hilly, dry location, it's not going to do well. Whereas if you put purple prairie clover there, it's going to do great. It loves the sun and the dry conditions. So here's another example of dry shade as a particularly common problem in people's yards. It's an urban problem, so you get dry, shady conditions on the north side of your building where it's blocking the sun, or some of these commonly used landscape plants like Norway maple and Norway spruce produce a lot of shade underneath, and they also prevent the rainfall from getting underneath, so it stays dry and shady. And dry shade isn't really found in the wild. It's an urban problem. So I like to show this biomes of the world just to demonstrate that. Like the deserts are hot, dry, and sunny, but they're not shady. Whereas you'll have the rainforests are really wet and shady, but there really isn't anywhere where it's dry shade, not many places. And also I like to point out that every non-native plant is native to somewhere else, which in the reason why an invasive plant is a problem is because if you bring a plant from somewhere else to your backyard, there's a chance it might be a bully and outcompete the other plants because it doesn't have its natural competitors where when it's in the place where it's from, it has natural competitors that keep it in check. So choosing plants for dry shade, often we like to use sedges or ground covers that are shade adapted. And we try to find an analogous native plant community that will work in dry shade. The closest thing that we have found are oak savannas, which are communities of scattered oak trees above a layer of prairie grasses and flowers. And the trees are spaced so that there is some shade and some patches of sun. And this savannas are a transition between tallgrass prairie and woodland. So this is our dry, part shade tolerant equivalent in the upper Midwest. So here are some of the natives that we find in oak savannas: big leaf aster, nodding onion, wild geranium, Pennsylvania sedge, Jacob's ladder. So these are some of the flowers that we might use in a dry shade situation.
Okay, now I'd like to talk a little bit about green infrastructure and how it helps the environment. Green infrastructure is a phrase that some of you might have heard of, some of you might have not have heard of, but it is a natural method of capturing, absorbing, and storing rainwater and melting snow before it gets into our natural water bodies like our lakes and rivers. Often we do incorporate native plants into green infrastructure. That's the green part of the phrase. And as a system, it helps protect rivers and lakes from water pollution. It also reduces the risk of flooding, and we've all seen the flooding that's happened throughout the metro area in the last just this past summer and the last decade or so. So using green infrastructure techniques will really help alleviate the flooding and soak up the groundwater. It also adds diversity to the landscape, which, as we mentioned before, is very important. Gray water is really the water that runs off across the hardscape of the world into the streams and sewers and out into the lakes and rivers. So the major goal is with green infrastructures to try to slow it down and soak it up before it runs quickly as it would before use of it into the as quickly. So it kind of slows it down, and then it soaks it up and filters it out. This is an image of a very small bioswale, and we're doing a lot of projects in the city of Milwaukee that are introducing these as a green infrastructure system. So we like them because not only are they providing ecologic health, but they're also adding beauty, and they're promoting a sense of place. And by sense of place, all we mean is that as you walk down the street, instead of a normal concrete sidewalk, you start to see this as a memorable spot that is attractive and interesting, and also providing health for the city. These are some of the ways that green infrastructure systems can be implemented, and some of you might already be incorporating these. The bioswale, we're going to talk about a little bit more, but that you've seen them around the city of Milwaukee and other places. It's simply a depression in the ground that captures stormwater runoff and holds it for a while, and then it drains away. Permeable pavers come in a lot of different modular looks. They look like cobblestones, or traditional pavers are bricks, but the water can infiltrate through them, and often is kept in a storage tank below, where then it drains away. Green roofs are being incorporated in a lot of modern developments. They can be a small scale add-on to an existing building, or used. I think there were actually a requirement now in the city of Chicago for all new buildings to soak up rainfall using primarily dry conditioned plants, because they don't stay wet a lot. But that's another great system. Trees are a wonderful way and wonderful natural sponge to soak up stormwater. A rain garden is really just a miniature bioswale, and that's something that can be incorporated into a home landscape. And then rain barrels are another way to capture and store water that falls from the sky. People have asked us, what is a rain garden exactly? And so this is a diagram that we put together of a simple rain garden planting plan that could be incorporated into a home landscape. So as Christy mentioned, getting the right plant for the right site, right location is key to these. So you want to use plants that can stay wet for a little while, but these rain gardens store water. It is not actually a wet pond. And the water is cleaned as it moves through it. It also recharges the groundwater supply. And as we will talk about many times over and over again, it supports native insects, which supports the birds. And that brings you back to the whole big idea of diversity in the landscape. Some plant choices for a rain garden. There are quite a few, but these are just a few common ones that we use over and over again. They can take a short period of flooding, less than 24 hours. But the interesting thing about rain gardens is they're primarily dry. So these plants are quite resilient and quite adaptable to a lot of different conditions. But coneflower, prairie dropseed, blue flag iris, sedge. Sedge is a wonderful plant that is incredibly adaptable. It's become one of my favorites. And then Joe Pyeweed is another one. So these are just a couple that you can use.
Another trend we've noticed are lawn alternatives. So, and embrace your diversity instead of fighting it. We saw that the University of Minnesota was promoting flowering bee lawns, and I've also seen a number of products being promoted, which is planting low-growing flowering plants within your lawn. I will note, though, if you don't add fertilizer or herbicides or pesticides to your lawn, nature is going to provide this for you all by itself, because one of nature's rules is diversity. But here's some other lawn alternatives that can help you increase diversity. So different types of ground covers, the sedge lawns. There's a number of sedges that, like James said, we're really falling in love with. There's a thing called the no-mow lawn, which is just a lawn seed mix that is red fescue based, but it grows to about 6 inches and then stops. So it's lower maintenance. You don't have to mow it as much. Native meadow, like a mix of low growing native plants. And then the white clover lawn, or one of the newer products is micro clover, which is just a variety of the traditional white clover that used to be planted in lawns very commonly pre-World War II. But then after the big chemical companies decided to promote themselves, it fell out of fashion. So now it's not fashionable anymore, but we think it would be a good thing to maybe bring back. And then you can also add diversity in your landscape in your privacy screen areas. So there are native plants that would make good screens, like nine bark can be a good screener, white spruce, white pine, some of the viburnums, even Virginia creeper, when planted on a trellis, that could serve as a screen and add some native fruits and diversity. And then grasses too. Everybody thinks of the flowers all the time, but they forget that a prairie is like 70 or 80% grass, and the flowers are held up by the matrix of grasses. This is why often some of the native plants are kind of floppy, because they are adapted to being held up by grasses on either side of them. So we like to interplant our planting beds with grasses or sedges to help prop them up. And then deer and rabbits are, everybody has problems with those in your landscape, but grasses and sedges are good choices for deer as well, because deer browse leaves. They don't eat grasses and sedges. Grazers do. And there's some other native plants that deer strongly dislike. A hungry deer is going to eat anything, but there you can help try and discourage it by thorny plants, because it hurts their mouth to eat them. Plants with strong taste, like onion or mint, or plants with bitter tastes, or milky sap, like witch hazel. So that's another strategy.
Now we'd like to talk a little bit about designing for diversity and the design process, which has been a decades-long love of mine. So this, again, weaves our ideas of combining beauty and environmental health. We don't pretend to be bird experts. You all are the bird experts. So we thought that we will leave the bird expertise to you, but we could help with some design guidelines to keep in mind if you're interested in promoting bird habitat in your own area. Some key, an idea to really keep in mind is the idea of layers for bird habitat design. So we'll just walk through those. The canopy layer would be trees, and that provides nesting sites for larger birds, perches, and then also for food. Below that is a subcanopy or understory layer, which would be small trees and taller shrubs. So at a height of about 5 to 15 feet, this offers protection and nesting spots for birds. Below that would be the shrub layer. So dense shrubs provide safety from predators, weather protection, and can also be used as a food source and also for nesting. The ground layer would be low shrubs and perennials, and that provides cover for ground feeding and nesting birds. And then even the leaf litter and the soil, allowing that to remain and not breaking all the leaves away, supports insect population which feeds the birds. With planting design, some people go to the garden center and they'll buy one of this and one of that and pop it in their yard. I like to take a different approach, which these pictures illustrate, of using large masses of one plant in big painterly drifts, which I think adds a lot of drama to the landscape. It allows different species to shine as a group, which I think gives more aesthetic impact, but then something else will bloom or fill in and take its place. So my adage is, when in doubt, plant in large groupings, go bold. And these are some fun pictures of the one on the far left is Umfen, Sweden, is a famous landscape design firm that uses this technique of large drifts. And then at the bottom, many of you have been to the Lurie Garden in Chicago, which also incorporates this technique of big swaths of one species in kind of this painterly, impressionistic style. Some diversity goals in our field is we try to make the planet better for both people and all living things through the application of ecology. We like to show the importance of maintaining ecological health for all because we feel it should be something that everyone has access to, no matter where you are in the world. We really value stewardship and education, which is why Christy and I do programs like this to just spread the word and help educate people and show how fun and interesting we think it is and hopefully inspire them. When we have a beautiful natural world that we can connect with, I feel it improves everyone's quality of life. So we all benefit from that. And then we all know how important it is to have social connections and appreciation of the natural world. So without those, our lives are really lacking, and a connection to nature has been proven to be very, very important to all people. With some design goals, the word regenerative, we just try to find ways that we can revitalize and energize the landscape. So increasing carbon storage through nature-based solutions. We've talked previously about the human health benefits of nature, where many of our jobs involve improving water quality and flood storage. And then most every project we do has some aspect where we're increasing biodiversity and wildlife habitat. I'll talk quickly about our design process. And the reason we do it is because people think designers just kind of go back to a desk and snap their fingers. And if you see the TV shows, it just designs happen, but it really is a very specific multi-step process with a lot of changes and revisions where you start with a big idea and reach to the end. So this shows a graphic structure of how a design problem is solved, where we first will analyze a site and look at what's there. Then we come up with big ideas. Those are finalized. Then we get to very specific construction drawings that can be priced and bid, and then the project is built. And then after it's built, we have to really monitor it to see what worked and what didn't work, so we can know what to do better the next time, or work with what already did work well. So the first step of site inventory, this is Christy out in the wild, studying an existing landscape. And as we mentioned in the beginning, every site is unique. Nothing is really off the shelf. So every single project we do has unique characteristics that we have to take into account. So we'll identify the species that are there. We'll look at slope, soil type, sun, shade, invasives. One of my favorite things is to look at cultural and historic influences and how that has affected a site. And then of course we have to do a lot of measurement. There's a lot of geometry in our world, and understanding volume and area and overall boundaries of what we have to work with. The next step in analysis, before you get to design, this is really studying what is the problem. And this is an example of what we call a SLA, or a sustainable land audit, which is a service that we offer where we'll take a site and really study it from an environmental perspective and see what's working, what's not working. And so it's kind of the what, where, when aspect of it. What is working well? What do you want to change? Looking at entrance points, views, the ways through the site, then breaking it down into zones of use zones. It could also be sun zones, wind, shade, soil, and then diagramming how circulation flows through the site. How do people get there, cars, buses, and even wildlife? The next step is concept generation, which is, I think, probably my favorite part of the whole design process, where you come up with the ideas or themes that can frame the entire design. And this could work at a very small scale residential garden. It can work on a large 100-acre public site. So it works on any scale. This is a project we did. It was an old malt factory from the Victorian era. About the Victorian era in England. They brought it over to Racine and recreated the factory, and then it has been turned into a multi-mixed use site down in Racine. So that's what we call adaptive reuse. But this is interesting because it's integration of cultural history and with modern modern uses. We incorporated a lot of elements of green infrastructure to capture stormwater. There was a wetland mitigation component to it. We used a lot of native plants. It also provided affordable housing, which was a much needed commodity in the city of Racine. And the overall goal is to create a sense of community so that people could live here, work here, and recreate in the same area. This is all it's pretty much completed at this point. Then going into the final concept where we take the rougher ideas and then we shape them into a chosen one. And often a client there's a lot of back and forth with clients where they help give us input and we come up with the final design that we brought into construction documents. So this was a green roof we did for Red Apple School, also in Racine, which is a project that was just completed in fall. So this gives children a connection to nature. They learn about the environment. It blends beauty and functionality. And so this diagram is one of the green roof feature where the kids can go out and learn and play, and it also soaks up water and serves as a green infrastructure element. This is the same place, the rooftop garden, but shows how detailed we get with construction documents, where every single plant is chosen, picked out, called out, and then everything is detailed and quantified so that a contractor can price it and then put together bids for it. And then it's actually constructed just like an architectural drawing, but ours are primarily outside using both natural materials and hard materials, hardscape and softscape. One of the funnest parts of our job is to watch our designs that started in our head and then went onto paper and watch them get built. So this is one of our MPS school projects, which is part of the Green and Healthy Schools initiative that takes pretty bleak asphalt yards that was all the kids had to play in and turns them into these lush green parks filled with shade trees and play equipment and green infrastructure elements so they can learn about nature and recreate and have fun and have, we hope, a higher quality of life. After the project is built, we can't just walk away and leave it because the all-important word of maintenance is key. And everyone comes to us and says, we want a low maintenance, a zero maintenance landscape. And as Christy pointed out, any living landscape requires maintenance. So this slide shows one of the things we educate people on is with maintenance crews is understanding what is a weed, what is a native plant, and knowing which weeds they need to take out and eradicate, which are the most invasive ones, is really part of the educational process. This is a project that some of you might know know about, some of you don't, but this is in the central part of Milwaukee, north of Capitol Drive on 30th Street, and it's one of a 3-site system of green infrastructure for an area of the city it's very flood prone, and the residents there have had a lot of issues with stormwater runoff. So this is the third and largest basin. North is actually to the left in this plan diagram, but it's a huge green infrastructure basin that will collect stormwater and hold it and then let it drain away. But in addition to that, the bottom left picture shows how it's going to incorporate plazas and artwork, educational signage, recreational fields, playgrounds, hiking trails, a hill, and a lot of different areas that'll make a beautiful place that'll really be identity for the neighborhood.
So with that, we want to just put a call to action on your plate, where everybody can do their part to reduce your carbon footprint and increase biodiversity. So one of the things you can do is encourage your local municipality to require native plantings in new developments or redevelopments. Some of the developers are only going to do it if they are told they have to do it by the city or the village. Also create a local carbon market, so maybe statewide or in your municipality to plant trees or other green green areas to offset carbon use. And then, like we said, you have the power to increase diversity and reduce the carbon footprint right in your own backyard. And people ask us, where do you buy native plants? It used to be very difficult to find native plants. And when I first started doing this, it was often you go to native plant sale on Mother's Day weekend. And this is still happening. MMSD still has them every spring. And then the Lake Michigan Bird Observatory is having theirs on May 30th of this year at the Upper Lake Park. So those are still good options to get some good plants. But you can also get plants online from Agricol. They'll ship them right to your house and you can mix and match the trays so you don't have to buy 38 plant of one plants of one species. Prairie Nursery does it, Prairie Moon, and their Johnson's Nursery recently just started providing native plant plugs as well. And I've seen their material, it looks great. So thank you very much. We really appreciate having the opportunity to talk to everyone, and we're going to stop sharing and open it up.
If anyone has questions, we'd be happy to answer them to the best of our ability.
Oh, except for I hid the sharing. Okay. I think we're good.
Great. Thank you so much, James and Christy. I learned a lot. I'm really excited to see the West Basin come alive. I've gotten to see it, how it is now. So looking forward to that. We can open it up to questions. Feel free to add those to the chat. I believe we can also unmute you all. You now all should have ability to unmute yourselves. If you have a question, you can also raise your hand if you have any.
Or put it in the chat. Let's see.
We do have one question in the chat from Quinn. Do you have any recommendations for implementing a nature positive planting on the Hell Strip Boulevard?
Hell Strip Boulevard.
Otherwise known as like I call it the nuisance strip, the area between your sidewalk and the street.
Right. That is, it's a little tricky because legally that's within the city right of way. So it's really the city or the village's jurisdiction if they want to rip it up. But you do see some people planting those. If I'm understanding correctly, you're free to dig it up and plant it, but you have to have the understanding that the city could get in there and do maintenance or do utility work or whatever. So they have the right to actually tear it up. If that's what you're talking about, the space between the sidewalk and the curb.
I believe so. Quinn also says that he's on a busy intersection and is challenged by height.
Right, you have to be careful that you don't plant things that are too tall that are gonna obstruct the traffic triangle. People need to be able to see to turn right or left. Yeah, that the Hell Strip is usually a tough area because it's often underneath a shady tree and often a Norway maple. So we like to say experiment, try different ground covers, and I think we could recommend using some of the sedge species that we're talking about.
Yeah, sedges are really durable. You could try some of the lower native plants that wouldn't get too high. But yeah, that is a area. Visibility is really a key thing. And then of course you're gonna have to, we think about the right plant for the right place. It's gonna get salt, if you're the salt or snow, and so it's have to be in urban conditions. These plants have to be really, really tough, and so nothing fussy or woodlandy can grow in that kind of an environment. So you just have to make the right choices and do your homework and studying what's available. But there are some native choices that would work in that type of location.
Thank you. We have a comment from Sarah that she loves the idea of using impressionist paintings as inspiration for plantings.
Well, Sarah, I'm glad you like that because I like it too. It is fun. It just you can do it on a small scale, but instead of doing one of this and one of that, there's the rule of using odd numbers, like in flower arrangement, like threes, fives, sevens, nines of things, and that gives you kind of that more of that impact of a drift. It's a fun idea that you can try even on a small site.
We have time
Well,
for
again,
Oh,
maybe one
sorry.
more question if there is one. I wanted to make one more comment about how much I enjoyed you highlighting sedges and grasses because they're often very underrated. And at least in the Port Washington area, the deer are very hungry. So I'm always recommending them at our yard consults. So it's great to hear you
yeah,
echo that too.
and as I've learned from Christy, the grassy matrix is really critical as the support structure for a lot of the flowering plants. So it's important to include them.
Yeah. Yeah, if anyone has any additional questions, you're welcome to reach out to us anytime.
Thank you so much, Christy and James, and thank you all for attending and being interested in building bird habitat in your backyards and increasing biodiversity.
Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Bye, thank
Bye.
you.
Cheers.